Hey everybody, so today I'm going to be showing you my process for making Claire Saffitz Foolproof Tarte Tatin. This recipe has a lot of steps, I'm not gonna lie to you. I'll let you know at the end if it was like one of my favorite things ever and I think it's worth it, but you should set aside a significant amount of time or be sure to break it up over a couple of days. But it's a traditional French recipe. It's something I feel like everyone should try once. So especially if you like to cook fruit, like apple tarts, you'll really like this. So I hope you enjoy. Okay guys, really excited to bake this with you all today. My cousin's gonna join us for the second part of this, but she's out right now. So I'm gonna kick off by roasting the apples. I can break this whole process down into a couple steps for you. It's roasting the apples, making the glaze from what's left over, making the caramel, then rolling out the dough and baking it. So we made the rough puff yesterday. It's in the fridge. So that's done, which is a huge thing to check off. So now I'm gonna prep the apples and we're gonna go ahead and roast them until they're soft. So you're gonna wanna cut off the poles of the apples, which is what I'm doing here, so that they lay flat. And then after that, you're gonna peel them and cut them in half and core them. So you wanna get out all those seeds in the middle. This would be so much easier if you had an apple corer or a melon baller, but an apple corer would be amazing. You guys, this took me a long time, especially because about halfway through, I realized I need double the apples that she called for. I guess all mine were considered small. It's not apple season, but this took me a long time. So highly recommend having an apple corer on hand before you start this. Once you have them standing up in your cast iron, you're going to add your maple syrup, your brandy, and 1 teaspoon of apple cider vinegar and just a little bit of salt. Then you're going to cover this and put it into the oven. It's going to roast for an hour to 15 to an hour 45. She says that you want the apples to be al dente, which is not a clear indicator for me, given that mentally I think of pasta, but you don't want them to be so soft that they're falling apart. This is me taking the apples out the first time to realize it was not even close. So I had to put them back in. They ended up roasting for about 2 hours. This was, again, I was like, okay, no, there's too much resistance. And this third shot, this is what I ended up going with. I think they could have gone longer. So I just didn't want them to be falling apart, but they were still too hard if I reflect upon it. It's okay because they cook more later. But after this, you're gonna put those in the fridge and then take that juice that's left over in your cast iron and just cook it down, reduce it so that it's thick and syrupy, and we're gonna use that at the end for the glaze of the tart. Clean off your pan and then make your caramel. So you want to add the sugar in an even layer. My cousin took the lead on this. That's her displaying the sugar. And I was in a rush, so I was like, just stir it. But you're not supposed to stir it. Newsflash, following the recipe is really helpful. So don't stir it. Let it melt so that you don't get these sugar clumps. But it was fine, it melted. Once that's melted, take it off the heat, add in your butter. And then we're gonna let that cool completely in the pan. It's gonna be completely solid, sort of like an ice skating rink on top. And that's exactly what you want. Now you're going to roll out your rough puff, and our cast iron pan for this whole thing was 12 inches, even though the recipe calls for 10. I just made the dough a little bit thinner, added a couple apples, and it was really easy to modify. So I'm rolling this out, I'm measuring it with a 12-inch plate, just so that I know it's big enough and that I'll have room on the sides to fold it down. So once we had that wide enough, you'll see we cut around, leaving an edge, and then we're gonna score it with a fork. So we've added our apples smooth side down into the cast iron, and you're just gonna lay your puff pastry over it. You wanna fold the sides over because we're gonna flip this upside down. So you want it to be able to catch the apples and sort of hold them. So just gently wrap it around the sides. This is gonna bake for around an hour, but you're gonna start at 425 for about 20 minutes and then reduce the heat to 350. You want the pastry on top to be browned and the caramel on the sides to be bubbling. For obvious reasons, you're gonna wanna be careful here. You're gonna have hot caramel coming out, so flip it over the sink carefully with some mitts. And then you're gonna slide it over to the side. There's gonna be some leakage, but then you can see our excitement when we pulled it up. None of the apples stuck and they were all beautiful just sitting there on our puff pastry. Then you're gonna bring that glaze back out that we previously reduced. You can heat it in the microwave if it's hardened too much, and you're just gonna dab it over the top of the apples, and that's gonna give you a very glossy final look. And here was the final product. It was super satisfying. It's obviously gorgeous, and we hit so many different elements of baking, like pastry and caramel. So it was tons of fun, and we served it that night with some vanilla ice cream. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that recipe. My cousin and I had a ton of fun making it. Overall, though, I would give this like a 6 or 7 out of 10 just because it is so labor intensive. Again, nothing is technical. I mean, making rough puff, you can argue there's some technical pieces to that, but roasting the apples, making the caramel, nothing is like, oh, I can't do this, but there are so many elements that it took us about 2 days to make this, and it was good. I feel like if I were to make another dish like this, though, I would go back to the classic apple tart that Claire has in this recipe book. I think maybe just the bigger chunks of apple, which is what makes a tarte tatin, but the bigger chunks of apple were less appetizing to me. But it's a classic. I think it also really builds your baking chops. Like, you're gonna be making rough puff, you're gonna be making caramel, you're gonna be roasting fruit. So there are a lot of elements involved. And so I feel a lot more confident in my baking now that I've done this successfully. But yeah, overall, I would lean towards making the apple tart again. I wouldn't make this again. I'm sure if you went to Paris and tried a tarte tatin, it would be 10 times better than the one that we made. We did have a ton of fun, but I noticed that the leftovers sort of sat in the fridge, whereas a lot of other things I bake will just sort of fly off the shelf. So that's my review. I hope you enjoyed the video and maybe even try it out yourself. Let me know if you do, and I'll see you next time. Bye.